Why, who's calling me? Who's calling Appleseed Man? Why, Johnny Appleseed? Well, that's what some of the children call me. Yes, they call me that because, well, I do like apples a lot, and I've been working on planting them. Oh, that's what my job is. I grow apple trees and I sell them out here on the frontier. I've been doing that for years. Why did they call me Johnny? Well, because my given name is Jonathan Chapman. My father's name was Nathaniel Chapman. He worked with George Washington. He was an officer in the Revolutionary War of this country. Yes, I've been in this part of Ohio for some time now. Well, traveler, would you like to hear some stories? Yes, I do like to tell stories. I've told many a story out here on the frontier, all about my adventures living out here. You can sit yourself down. We'll spend a little bit of time out here in this fine woodland. I've been looking along this bank here. Perhaps I could find a good place to grow some apple trees. That's what I like to do. But while I've been out here, I have had encounters with bears, and I have seen rattlesnakes, and I have seen the red man, and I have traveled and slept out here most of my life. Well, why don't I have shoes on? Well, you see, I do not like to kill animals for their skins, the Lord provided me with very good, tough feet, and so I walk out here and it doesn't seem to hurt my feet. Oh, I know in the winter time, this past winter did get somewhat cold. I took some old burlap and I just wrapped it around my feet when I needed to, but the rest of the time I've gone barefoot. Why do I look so raggedy? Well, I don't have to have fancy clothes. They have to be useful for me. Of course, they have to help me with the elements, and I have old coffee sacks that I wear, and people have passed on old clothes. I found this nice stick that a beaver had chewed on. It makes a fine stick, and I can use it to plant little seeds in the ground. I have my apple seeds here with me, and I always carry my good book. I love to read the good words out here. I do. Well, an adventure. I'd like to tell you an adventure about the bounty of this land. There was one day I remember, it was in the fall. I believe the year was around 1813. I was up by Richland County. Richland County, not too far from Mansfield, Mount Vernon, Knox County, down that way, upper reaches of the Scioto River, and not too far away from the Mohican River. I was out there in the fall and I saw it. It started as a dark line out to the north and east of me. And I thought it might be a storm a-coming, because it was a blackness in the sky and it was wide on the horizon, and it just kind of kept on coming. Oh, but by and by I realized it was not clouds, and they were flying and wheeling around, and the sun struck their wings, and you could see the grays and blues in them, and sometimes the purpleness of them. Oh, and a hawk would come down to get some of them, and they would wheel and fly in circles, and it was a sight to behold. What were they? Why, they were wild pigeons, of course. Oh, you might call them passenger pigeons. Yes, they flew out here. Oh, all day long I saw them coming, and they flew flock after flock, group after group, and sometimes so many that it seemed like they darkened the sky. The sun was obscured by them. And sometimes I thought it might have been raining or snowing, because all that pigeon poop coming out of the sky, all that duff coming down, oh, good fertilizer for this land. Where were they going? Why, you know about passenger pigeons. They sometimes take a fancy to go fly far away. I guess they go down south. They were headed to the south and west of me. I don't suppose I know exactly what they do, but I know that they get hungry. I have seen them at other times, and they like to eat the mast out here, the seeds from the oak trees and the hickory trees. Ha. Well, I stood there in amazement of the Lord's bounty that day. Those pigeons flew by me all day, and I resolved just to stay there. And in the morning, I saw more pigeons flying, and the next day even more. 3 full days it took for those pigeons to fly by. They were beyond counting. They were beyond the sand along a bank in the stream, all those grains of sand. And the world, the Lord just gives that bounty to us to use. Why, I know people like to eat passengers. They'll shoot them up in the sky and they'll fall down, and oh, it is just a gift. Just like the apple is a gift that the tree provides. Now, if you want to eat meat, then apple, it is something that we have, but the passenger pigeon is another thing the world gives us. No, I myself, I do not eat them, but I hold no fault with somebody who does. We see, we all have to live on this world, and we make our own way, and we try to live a simple life, and then your reward in heaven will be rich. Yes, Emanuel Swedenborg, he's a man who taught us about being good Christians, and he taught us about how the world is full of angels to talk to us and show us the way. And I think that the apple is something that the Lord made to show us the way, how it just gives its bounty away for no cost, and it just shares it out there. Well, by and by, I have seen those passenger pigeons on other days. I have. On other days I've seen them, and those passenger pigeons, well, they may be out here nesting in a tree in the spring, but not just 1 or 2. Well, there would be hundreds in a tree. Hundreds in the next tree and the next tree. Oh, so thick, and the air would be full of their smell as they'd come and go, and their eggs would hatch out, and those small chicks would sit there in the nest, and the parents would take turns going finding food, and they'd come back and they'd spit out that pigeon milk for those babies, and they would just grow fat in the nest, and lumpy, and they'd be these squabs sitting in those nests. You could see them sticking out of those nests. By and by, one day, the parents, they wouldn't come back. They wouldn't come back, and those squabs would be sitting there for a day or so, waiting to be fed. Nobody's coming. Well, you know what they would do then? Hop out of that tree. They'd be down on the ground. Well, a few of them might have been hurt, and there were some foxes and raccoons waiting for them, and they would eat their fill. Bounty of the earth being given to all God's creatures. Well, then those squabs, they would be walking along, flipping up leaves, just flipping them up, looking for seeds, for beech nuts, and they'd look for acorns, and they'd look for hickory nuts, and oh, this forest is full of those. And they'd find them, and the squab would spread out like a flood across the land, walking and picking up leaves, and the ones in the front, they'd find plenty, but the ones in the back, not so many. So by and by, those ones in the back would try to push up to the other ones, and it was like a flood, and it was rolling across, and they'd flap their wings, and they would try to hop over each other, and by and by, those wings, they became more useful to them. Why, just like I have useful things, like this pan is a useful thing for me, I can use it as a hat. Well, those wings were useful for those squabs, and they would use them and hop over their brethren, and they'd get those seeds, and by, they got better and better at that, and that front of squab walking through the land would look more like a raging flood, and the leaves would be flying, and they would be up in the air, and soon they realized they didn't have to stay on the ground, and the whole group would just up and go into the air and fly on. I bet they would join their parents somewhere in the by and by. Well, I've had many adventures out here in this woods. I've seen many gifts that have been provided for us. Probably none greater than the apple, maybe none greater than the passenger pigeon, or a kindness from a stranger. So many gifts that they're beyond count. Well, I lived a good life. My adventures took me on up to Allen County, Fort Wayne, Indiana. And over time, I did get to be an old man in my 70s, still planting trees, but one winter I did catch a cold and I died, and I'm buried up there. So I don't wander the land anymore, but even though I died, people kept telling stories about Johnny. They kept saying Johnny had this adventure and went out west. Maybe he followed the Oregon Trail. They said John Chapman, he went on down to West Virginia and planted apple trees down there. So I just tell those stories same as I did when I was alive. I tell stories about what people said happened to me even after I died. And they say Johnny Appleseed cried one day. See, it was in the year of 1914. And those passenger pigeons, so bountiful when I had seen them in 1813, well, within almost 100 years, people had used them. They had brought wagon trains and they had knocked them out of the trees when they were nesting, and they had pickled them and sent them in barrels out east, and they had fed them to hogs, and oh my, they had used up so many of them that the immensity of those flocks had passed away, and we had used them all up, and you couldn't find a passenger pigeon on the land. Why, they had a few in zoos here and there, and so many of them were stuffed and put in people's hats and all sorts of silliness. But the last one died in Cincinnati. I think they said her name was Martha, and she died in 1914. And so the bounty of that gift that the Lord gave us is all gone. Hard to think about that. Maybe there's a lesson in there. You see, we have so many gifts. We have to be careful. We have to treasure them, and we have to be good stewards and take care of them. Like a farmer will take care of that orchard so that it can give him that bounty every year. We have to take care of this land and the fish in these rivers. We've got to take care of it, and so that we can use these gifts wisely. And then we'll all live in that New Jerusalem right here. Yes, that's what I'm thinking. Well, thank you very much, traveler, for listening to my stories. Maybe we'll come together again some other day and we'll share some more stories. Oh, bye now. I'm going to make my way back down the stream.